the questions are literally flooding in, which is wonderful because it means I don't have to make lots of questions up, which is great. So thank you, everyone. We've got quite a bit of time, so I'll try and get through as many as possible, and I'll try and group them as we go along. But what would be really nice, I'll start with you, Jenny, is if you could just explain a little bit more about the reflective sessions, about the format they took, because there'll be many people here, I think, that perhaps don't know a lot about what reflective sessions mean. And Corinne asked, in doing that, could you talk about how many reflective sessions there were? And were public contributors actually compensated for their time in reflective sessions? And that's a question from Laura. So yeah.
Let me see how much of that I can remember. Let me start answering. You let me know if I've missed anything. So in terms of the structure of the workshops and the reflective sessions, so we would have a co-design workshop, and so within a week of that happening, having a reflective session. We did have 7 co-design workshops in total, and we had, I want to say, about 4 reflective sessions, but the reason that we had less reflective sessions is because at times we would have co-design workshops that were happening really close to each other. So sometimes we would sort of combine a reflective session for 2 co-design workshops, for example, just to not overwhelm people with the amount of meetings that we would be putting in. In terms of the reflective sessions themselves, depending on how many people sort of attended that session, they would be between half an hour to an hour long. And again, just really focusing on not the content of what was discussed within the co-design workshops, but more focusing on the process of it, the structure of the meetings, the accessibility of it, and sort of looking at how we can improve those processes moving forward. And we would sort of summarize the feedback that we would get within those reflective sessions and also share that with the researchers. So if we were to suggest any changes to co-design workshops, making sure that everyone knew where these changes and suggestions were coming from. In terms of reimbursement, we did reimburse people for their time for the reflective sessions. I think we've reimbursed people for any time that they've shared with us. I think if there's been anything that we haven't reimbursed, it would be sort of optional activities that would have been sort of requested by PPI members. For example, in one of our co-design workshops, we had Larry Fisher, who is sort of pretty much a legend when it comes to the research of diabetes distress. And PPI members really wanted sort of more time with him just to be able to do Q&A and just to get to know him better and have a conversation. We were able to pull together sort of a Q&A with patient forum members and Larry. So that was sort of more of a fun additional bonus thing that we didn't reimburse for, but anything else outside of that, even sort of prep time for meetings and needing to read materials in advance, we would calculate for that and reimburse for that also. Did I miss anything, Gary?
No, we've got loads more questions on the reflective sessions. So Ishan asks, are these reflective sessions something you think would be good practice for all future research projects and not just for measuring impact?
I would say yes. I think like I sort of was saying in my final learnings, that I think it's really good to attain insights throughout the project, especially as sort of dynamics change within the project or processes change, or the flow of the project changes in line with sort of findings. I think it's important to be able to monitor any changes, whether they're positive or whether they're negative, just to be informed, to know whether to do something in the moment, whether changes are needed in the moment, rather than sort of what often happens is maybe like an evaluation form at the end of the project, and then thinking, oh, like these are great learnings to take to the next project, when actually this gives you the opportunity to change something live right at that moment, and improve the project whilst you're in the project. So I think I think you can never have too many insights and knowledge as to how your project is going in the moment, and acting based on that.
Thanks, Jenny. Because it does, if I could sort of jump into some questions here, it does feel to me like the focus has been very much on the process, trying to improve the process of the public involvement. And the reflective sessions, as you say, I think helps in that and collecting that information. And it enabled that continuous improvement, didn't it, through the project? Because as you say, there's little value in doing it right at the end, because there may be so many things you've got wrong, but it's like, oh, it's too late to learn that lesson now. But what tips would you give to people? Because one thing having reflective sessions and collecting people's views about where they think things could be improved and on what we should continue to keep doing, that we were doing well. But how do you ensure that that actually influences the decision-making process on the research? Or what factors do you think contributed to enabling us to implement those changes?
I think what really helped us, especially in this research group, is making sure that we had transparency all across the team, making sure that PPI wasn't just the PPI lead's responsibility, but that it was embedded all across different sort of work packages within the study, and therefore having a sort of a standard understanding of why we were doing the things that we're doing and why we were checking in with people. And so when we shared any learnings that we had attained from the reflective sessions, it was easier to share those with the research team without it without it feeling like criticism or feeling like we were trying to get in the way of what the researchers were trying to do. Because I think, there needs to be an acknowledgement before anything happens around what is flexible to change and what isn't, and being really open and transparent with the patient forum members also, in terms of saying, this is what we're gathering your feedback on. These are the things that you can actually change. These are the things that, unfortunately, in this project, we aren't able to be flexible on. This is just how it needs to be moved forward. And having that understanding makes sure that we're not just taking views sort of for the sake of it and then not doing anything and parking them somewhere without telling patient forum members. But it also means that we've got that understanding with the research team, and making sure that we've got that alignment within the team as a whole.
It was very much embedded in the governance of the project, wasn't it, Jenny? So that the public involvement leads had a place at the kind of the project managers meetings, and it's on the agenda, isn't it? And I think that really helps by really embedding it in the governance of the project, as opposed to having public involvement as an add-on. And that's partly reliant, I think, on working with a team of researchers that really buy into this. And I think that it means what we were doing is not an uphill battle, which was very good. I'm going to hand this question down to Victoria, who says, or asks, did you factor in all of the time and work required to carry out all of the PPI work when planning the project? Did it take more time than expected, and how did you manage this? And had you budgeted for the reflective sessions and the researcher time involved in these?
Great question. So multiple layers to this. In the protocol for the study, a lot of money had been put aside for PPI activities. But what we actually found when going through this, when sort of coming together to plan how we would start all of it, was that some money had been put aside for PPI activities that felt somewhat tokenistic, that felt a bit like just sort of involving people for the sake of it, rather than it supporting any particular sort of objective or aim. So we were able to sort of go in and remove some of those suggested PPI activities, just saying that it felt tokenistic, and being able to shift some of that money towards things that we thought would be more valuable. For example, the reflective sessions. In terms of time taken, I believe we've put in more time than we set out at the beginning. And we have had sort of certain opportunities where maybe we were a bit unsure about funding. But I think what's really important to highlight here is that, of course, you want to provide as much reimbursement across all activities as much as possible where you can. But I wouldn't let that limit you to the things that you would potentially want to do, in the sense that I wouldn't want you to think that there isn't the budget, so we're not going to be doing the PPI, especially if sometimes PPI has been a bit of a sort of second or like last thought, and it wasn't considered in a budget type thing. But often what you realize when you work with people with lived experience is that they come into it with loads of different motivations. And often if you just have that transparency around these are some additional things we're trying to do, but actually, regrettably, we don't have the money for it. It's completely optional. Is that something you would want to take part in? Often you will have people who will still want to put themselves forward for those types of activities. But I think in terms of researcher time, I think we were quite somewhat lucky in the sense that so Gary and I excuse me, started as PPI co-leads, me being someone with lived experience myself, but my role later changed to PhD student and research assistant. But because I had sort of supported Gary through most of the co-design workshops, we realized that there wasn't a specific need to replace that role, and that I would still be somewhat be able to support Gary in his position. And so some money became available in that sense. I feel like I'm rambling now, Gary.
No, you're not. You're doing absolutely fine. And I think all of this is absolutely really, really vital context. And I think, having used a PPI lived experience, I think I will ask Sophie this, but I think that also really benefited because you have clearly got insights that I won't have and will never have. I don't know if Sophie wants to comment on that.
Yeah, I think when we all sort of found out that you also had type 1, it sort of makes it mean more. I'm not saying that it wouldn't if you didn't, because that's, I don't want to rule anyone out from involving PPI.
I've been dissed. I'm being dissed.
No, that's what I mean, because you've been brilliant. You both are brilliant. So, but I think I don't know, maybe it's specific to type 1. I think maybe if you were doing this research into other things, but it's such a massive part of our makeup and our 24/7 everyday lives, that to have someone who gets that is really helpful. I don't think it's critical, but I think it's really it's been lovely for all of us, because we're like, oh, she knows.
Fantastic.
So,
Thank you. Thank you, Sophie. A question here from Laura. Jenny, I'll start with you. Did the reflective sessions involve the investigators?
No. So in the reflective sessions, we wanted those to be a complete sort of safe space where people could say anything that sort of came to mind about how the sessions were run, and the language used and the tone used, etc. So in the reflective sessions, they were just run by Gary and myself and the patient forum. So there were no researchers included in that at all. And what we would do is just sort of take the minutes and share sort of the summary notes of that with the research team. But we were quite clear on not including investigators in that. And again, the main purpose of that being giving people the space to be really open about how they felt that the sessions were going, and just giving space for if there was anything negative to bring up or if there was anything sort of positive. So, but I think that was quite a lengthy discussion we had, and a consideration we had in terms of whether to involve people or not. Don't know if you want to add to that, Gary.
Yeah, well, yeah, I will in a minute, but I'm going to ask Sophie first. Sophie, how would you have felt if we had included investigators in those meetings? Do you think it would have, for example, inhibited the discussion, the honesty, the openness?
Possibly. In some instances more than others. So definitely we could, as a group, I think, be fairly brutal if we didn't like something. So and we wouldn't have wanted to offend anyone, because everyone's doing this for the right reasons. You know, everybody's involved in this project for the right reasons. So I think that's definitely something to consider. I think it worked really well having you guys, so that we could all be really open and honest, and say if we thought something was absolutely not working or we felt offended by it or something like that. So I think so it's probably the way you've done it, I would say, is probably the best way, and then feed that back to the researchers. But that's not to say that's the case for everything. I think that this project's very personal, so a lot about mental health. Well, it is about mental health. So I think they're things you guys have to be really careful with our involvement. So I mean, it might be different if it's something less on a less personal level, but definitely within this project.
It's interesting because the reason I asked that is because on another project we've run similar reflective sessions, but we've done it in partnership with the researchers too. And I did that with some trepidation because of, as you said, Sophie, there is a danger that people could give very, very honest and brutal responses, and how that might work. And the other side of it is that it may inhibit people being open. But the reason we went for it in that project of having the research involved too was because the public contributors were part of a well-formed group already, so that I felt there was a kind of strength there, if you like. And they also had a relationship or an existing relationship with some of the researchers too, which was clearly, you can read the body language, the dynamics of the room was very positive, and there was an openness already in meetings. So I felt that worked, and I think you're right, Sophie. There isn't a right and wrong answer, but on this one, it was a newly formed group, as you mentioned, on some personal issues, and the feeling was to kind of not involve the investigators in that. But yeah, there isn't a right or wrong. I'm going to go now for a comment from Bella Starling. Hello, Bella. And the reason I'm going to go to this comment, because it articulates much more clearly my view and discussion that myself and Sophie and Jennifer were having before we came on here. So I'm going to read it out in full. So it's more of a comment than less a question, but I'm sure we can comment on it. So great presentation. Thanks for sharing. It's great to see an approach that embed continuous improvement of public involvement. And a question to everybody, including funders: how do we strike a balance between an expressed need to assess involvement, often used to justify public involvement, and often having to comply with metrics and approaches that aren't always fit for purpose, versus considering public involvement as a necessary and ethical imperative for engaged research, and therefore not needing justification? And this perfectly captures the argument, or the debate discussion we were having earlier. My view is very much on the latter, that if you accept that public involvement is a good thing and a necessary thing, I'm not sure of the merits of why we are trying to measure in some way the difference that it has on decision making. And I think the agenda for measuring comes from very much that kind of academic agenda, having to justify everything that we do and achieve. And when we say measure, we often mean quantify. And I don't think public involvement's about that. Public involvement is about relationships. And if you accept it's a good thing to have, then isn't it about trying to find out how we do it better? So how we involve people better. And it seems to me that the approach that you've outlined, Jenni and Sophie, is very much on that. So I know that you said about the things we were evaluating on measuring, but it felt to me that the focus on what we're doing was the extent to which we did our public involvement well and how we could improve. I know that's more of a rant than a question, but I don't know, Jenny or Sophie, you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I think in terms of the public involvement, as you said, I think it's accepted that patient and public involvement should occur. So it's not about how much it affects the decision making within the research would not sort of add or take away from the value of PPI, in the sense that I think it makes more sense to focus on optimizing the process of involvement, because we've accepted that it's good already, but the better we make the process, the more both we and the patient forum members will be able to get out of it.
Absolutely. We've got a few comments here, people agreeing, possibly some disagreeing, which is great. There isn't a right or wrong view here, is there? Okay. I'm going to ask some other questions here about, are public contributors involved at all in co-authoring any of the academic papers?
So that's something that we're currently working on. So the presentation today was mostly about one of our work packages, which focused on the co-design workshops. But actually, we've got patient and public involvement across various work packages within the study. One of them being the knowledge transference and dissemination work package, which is currently sort of working on the terms of reference and the publication sort of dissemination guidelines. And we do have patient forum members within that work package feeding into those documents. And one of the things that we will be aiming to do is to sort of bring patient forum members in to be able to be co-authors, as long as it's sort of aligned with the sort of journal criteria of being able to become an author. So it's definitely something that we've not yet done, because we're still at the very, very early stages of looking at publications generally within the study. But it is something that we're looking into. And in the meantime, we're sort of trying to go beyond academics in terms of doing blogs and including people in webinars and including them in a variety of different sort of medias, and spreading sort of their insights and influence in other ways also. But yes, we are considering including people in publications, but we've not yet done so.
Fantastic. And a few people, Jenny, including Simon, have mentioned the prevalence of diabetes in people from ethnic minorities. And could you comment on what we've done around making sure that our public contributors group is diverse, inclusive, etc.?
Yeah, so in terms of our recruitment, we've mainly gone through either social media, or we've also worked quite closely with Diabetes UK, going through their communities in action group. And what we did in our sort of recruitment materials was to be very specific, in the sense that the opportunity was open to everyone, but that we were looking to really encourage people from sort of global majority communities. And so we did get sort of a wide variation of locations and sort of age ranges and sort of various demographics. I think in our group, I think we still, as does everyone, face struggles when it comes to sort of using the right ways in getting our materials out to the groups that we're really wanting to involve. And I think there's probably some learnings for us to do there also, because I think we did manage to get some people from global majorities, but maybe not as much as we'd like to. But that wasn't the only demographic that we focused on. So I think it's really important to note that when we think about diversity, that diversity isn't just race, that there's socioeconomic background, there's deprivation, there's disability, there's gender, age, and all of these other sort of contributing factors that we definitely took into account when we try to do our recruitment. But often these are limited by time constraints and how quickly we need to recruit people. So I think those are some learnings that we could take forward. But I think what can often help in terms of bringing in global majorities is making sure that you're getting in touch with either charities or other sort of organizations who already have established relationships with the communities that you're wanting to target, and either having them help you put together your recruitment materials or going through them to recruit the communities that you're wanting to get in touch with.
Thank you, Jenny. And Richard asks, could you say something about how experienced were the public contributors in terms of patient and public involvement?
Yeah, so we had complete variety in terms of level of experience. So we've had people come forward who have done PPI activities for 20, 30 years, who are part of loads of different advocating groups, and who are very knowledgeable in terms of research and the terminology and how the processes work. But also we've had people come forward where this is the first ever PPI opportunity that they've ever taken part in. We've, going back to the age ranges, we have people come forward who have just turned 18, 19, and haven't sort of ever been involved in PPI activities or anything in the academic world, which is why we started off with sort of one-on-one orientation sessions where we just sort of explained what the study was, and really making sure they sort of knew what they were signing up for and sort of identifying what their needs might be, and then doing a PPI workshop for all of the PPI members, whether they were really experienced or not, just to make sure that we were all starting off from sort of the same page, which is why in those sessions, at the beginning of the session, we got sort of a confidence and understanding score, and at the end just making sure that it did go up in line with our training, and it did for all members. So that was just another opportunity to make sure that we were all on the same page in terms of our understanding of PPI. And then again, in terms of the workshops, we had the workshops themselves and the reflective sessions, but I would check in with people before the workshops, sending sort of slides and agendas in advance, giving people the opportunity to have a look over materials, and checking in with them whether they sort of understood them or whether they needed any help. But then also after the workshops, separate to the reflective sessions, sending out emails, just doing check-ins, especially considering that the topic of most of the workshops will be mental health related. So just checking in to make sure that this hasn't sort of triggered anything where the person might need a bit more support, but also checking in terms of if it's difficult to raise in the reflective session, whether they wanted to communicate over email, if they were having any struggles or weren't quite understanding what the point of some of our workshops were. So just having different options of communication also really helped in people coming forward in expressing what their needs and gaps may have been.
Thank you, Jenny. With just a couple more questions, I think. Jenny, where can people find out more about this research?
So we've got a KCL website and a LinkedIn. What I'll do is I can put that in the chat so people can see.
Yeah. The other thing we can do, actually, if you give it to Ricky, everybody, by the way, that is registered will receive this recording. Once it's up, we'll send you the recording, and we can send as well links to this particular project so you can find out more information. I'm going to give the last question to Sophie, and you've partly covered this, Sophie, I think, but what advice would you give to researchers who want to involve the public in their research. What for you are the key things that make that involvement successful?
Well, firstly, I'd say do it, involve people, because a bit like you, I don't really see the point of research, especially into something like this, without involving people. I think it's fundamental. But I think you guys have been, I mean, I've not been involved in PPI before. It was all new to me. But you guys, as far as I'm aware, have been an amazing example where we have had lots and lots of check-ins. I've always known exactly how to contact you if there was something on a one-to-one I wanted to talk about, or on the group sessions. So the befores with all the tools and anything we might need for a meeting, the meeting, and then the sort of post-meeting email and then reflective session, I think had it all covered, completely covered. And I think, yeah, so I would say for researchers, maybe just listen to your people like me, because you know, that they're the people you want to shape your project, aren't they? As in, sorry, that sounded a bit arrogant. I didn't mean it like that, but I mean, put it so that we are involved and give us opportunities to feedback, which I feel like you guys have done brilliantly.
Fantastic, thank you. And I'll just follow up a quick question, because Chris mentions, if there's one thing that you would have liked us to have changed or done, if we were starting again, is there anything that you think we could have done differently from the beginning?
Not for me. I've loved it all.
Fantastic.
I really enjoy it. And
I'll ask of Jenny, if you were starting out again, is there anything that you'd have done differently?
I think in terms of doing things differently, maybe a bit more alignment at the beginning between sort of PPI leads and the research team in terms of what it actually was that we were wanting to get from PPI members. I think that took a couple of meetings for us to be a bit more aligned about what it actually was that we were wanting to ask. And once we were very clear on that, I think we produced some really good work. But I think if researchers and PPI aren't very clear on what it is that we're wanting to do, and we just go into the meeting hoping that something valuable comes out, that gets a bit confusing for everyone. So I think just making sure that we have that alignment from as soon as possible. And I think one of the most valuable things that I feel has come out from the reflective sessions is having that pre-workshop informal just peer support session, where as Sophie said, it really helps sort of focus people when we're in the workshops, just because there's always excitement when people with lived experience come together, especially when there's a lot of isolation and loneliness, and maybe people within your inner circles that you can't talk to about these sort of things. So it's great to have dedicated space and time for that excitement and for that connection, to then be able to really focus on what it is that we're bringing into the workshops once we are aligned on what it is that we're doing.
Fantastic. Yeah, some valuable lessons there. I think it's fair to say we did have to work through some initial tensions at the beginning, didn't we, to embed it. But I think it's all works out very well. Well, I'm going to bring it to a close. So I want to thank Sophie and Jenny for what was an absolutely fabulous presentation, and obviously a very long Q&A. I want to thank everybody that attended this webinar and the brilliant questions that people asked. And I do apologise for not being able to get through them all. I was slightly swamped and overwhelmed by how many questions we had, which is fantastic, by the way. Please do, if you haven't joined us already, please do join the International PPI Network, and we've got a link there. You can please tweet us. You can join the conversation using that hashtag. You can follow us on Blue Sky, and indeed, please do connect with us on LinkedIn. Next slide, please, Ricky. And please do join us for our next webinar, Citizen Science, the ISALA project. Sarah Ahanak will be presenting this from the University of Antwerp, and that will be on the 1st of October. We say register now, but we will be sending the link out almost immediately after this this webinar closes, and we will send you that, and it will be on the social media, etc. So all it's left for me is to say thank you again to Sophie, Jenny, and thank you to Ricky and Caroline for doing everything behind the scenes here. And thank you all for attending and asking such good and tricky questions. Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your day. Bye now.
Thank you, Gary.
Bye bye.